Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material subject of our special order.
Without objections.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to come to the floor tonight to discuss our first freedom, religious liberty, as we recognize the 226th anniversary of the signing of our Constitution on September 17, Constitution Day. I'm hosting this special order as founder and co-chairman of the Congressional Prayer Caucus, a bipartisan group of more than 90 members of the House of Representatives dedicated to protecting religious freedom in America and preserving our nation's rich spiritual heritage. I co-chair this caucus with my good friend Mr. Mike McIntyre, a Democratic member from North Carolina, who unfortunately cannot be with us this evening. Faith and religious freedom are not party line issues. Members of the Congressional Prayer Caucus gather each week in the United States Capitol to pray for our nation. We leave political labels at the door, and we join in prayer for one another and our country. On September 17th, our nation will mark the 226th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution in Independence Hall, Philadelphia. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, was soon to follow. Religious freedom is the very first thing named in the First Amendment. It is our first freedom, and it's a fundamental human right. But as President Ronald Reagan so accurately observed, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. Our freedoms are fragile, and how quickly we forget their importance. An annual survey by the Newseum Institute's First Amendment Center revealed that only 24% of Americans are aware that religious freedom is a First Amendment right. We are forgetting our first freedom. It is this amnesia that results in the subjugation of the fundamental right of religious freedom. Just last month, a justice of the New Mexico Supreme Court recognized that their decision to uphold fines against a wedding photographer who declined to photograph a same-sex wedding meant that the photographer is now, quote, compelled by law to compromise the very religious beliefs that inspire, end of quote, her life. But the justice called this trampling of religious freedom, quote, the price of citizenship. The price of citizenship? No. Religious freedom is the very thing the Pilgrims sought when they landed in Plymouth and struggled to survive in a new and unknown world. Religious freedom was so important to our founding fathers that it was the first freedom they named as bearing protection from the government. It's not the price of citizenship. It is the hallmark of the American spirit of freedom. The American people recognize that the New Mexico Supreme Court's decision is wrong. A recent Rasmussen poll revealed that 85% of Americans believe that a wedding photographer who has a deeply held religious belief about marriage has a right to decline to photograph a same-sex ceremony. Even still, we see weekly reminders that religious freedom is being trampled in the name of tolerance. The Supreme Court's decision in United States v. Windsor has given validation to the basically false argument that the only reason anyone has to support traditional marriage is bigotry. We've forgotten President Obama's observation in 2012 that there are people of goodwill on both sides of the marriage debate. Over the last few months alone, we've seen so many injustices, like the Oregon bakery that's been forced to close its doors because of the visceral hate mail, threats, and boycotts they received simply for living their lives according to their faith. As some workers protest for higher wages, we see businesses like Hobby Lobby that pay their full-time workers significantly more than minimum wage, fighting for the ability to keep their doors open and their workers employed because they dare to operate their business according to the dictates of their conscience. We see an attack on the integrity of the military chaplaincy, an institution that exists to support the free exercise of religion for our brave service members as they leave home and family behind to enter harsh and foreign environments. And we see service members like Senior Master Sergeant Monk fighting to maintain their careers in the military because they dare to hold a traditional view of marriage. In Iran, Pastor Abedini languishes in the notorious Evin prison because of his Christian faith. He's an American citizen who has been wrongly sentenced to 8 years in prison because he dared to hold a certain religious belief, torn from his wife and 2 young children. As we approach the 1-year anniversary of his incarceration, We need to make sure that we realize that his fight for freedom is a reminder of how important it is that we remain a beacon for the fundamental right of religious freedom and the ability to live your life openly and freely on the basis of your convictions. We must defend Pastor Abendini and advocate for his immediate release to the safety of his family. As we honor Constitution Day, let us remember the fundamental right of religious freedom enshrined in the First Amendment. Members of the Prayer Caucus have not forgotten our first freedom. We stand ready to guard and protect it. I'm proud to partner with my good friend, Mr. McIntyre, in leading this extraordinary group of members known as the Congressional Prayer Caucus. I'm so pleased to be joined this evening by my colleagues who are working to protect religious freedom in America and around the world. And at this time, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to my good friend, Mr. Tim Walberg from Michigan.